Oh, well. All right, I'm just going to flip slide.
All right, Matt, are we ready to go?
We're all set.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Westminster City Council meeting for April the 13th. It's now 7 p.m. and we will declare the meeting open. At this point, I would ask each of you to think about where we're at and please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Parker, would you please take the roll of the council?
Mayor Atchison,
Here.
Councilor DeMott,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Sites,
Here.
Councilor Seymour,
Here.
Councilor Scully,
Here.
Councilor Smith,
Present.
and Councilor Bowles. Mayor, if you could just give me 1 minute. It looks like Councilor Bowles has had to rejoin.
You want to try again, Ms. Parker?
I do. I am trying to see if I can raise him. On the
He's on the
audio.
chat box.
All right. Councilor Bowles, one moment. Okay, Mayor, I got a message from Councilor Bowles that he is trying to get back on, so he is actively reconnecting. If we
Okay,
can just bear
we'll
with
pause
him
for
for a moment. Okay.
Can you even hear me now?
Councilor Bowles? Yes, we can.
Can
Thank
you hear me,
sir.
Michelle?
Yes,
Yeah,
we
sorry about
can.
it. I didn't do anything. I just got bumped off.
Okay, all are present, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the consideration of the minutes of the preceding meeting. Mr. DeMott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the City Council approve the minutes of the March 23rd, 2020, March 26th, 2020, March 30th, 2020, and April 6th, 2020 as presented.
Ms. Smith.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by the word of aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Seeing none, the minutes are carried. We have no presentations tonight. And for the record, we did receive one public comment that was included in the package, and the subject was the water rates, which has been postponed for the time being. Those comments will remain a part of the public record and will be posted along with the rest of the package. At this time, turn to city officials. Mr. Tripp.
Good evening, Mayor, Pro Tem, and council members. I don't have anything besides what's on the agenda tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Turning to council, any comments from the council? Ms. Parker, I'm sorry, Ms. Scully. Ms. Scully, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
I did not, sir. I'm sorry.
Okay, all right, sorry, understood your chat. Do you have any other comments from the council at this time? The sites?
Thank you, Mr. I just wanted to again have a heartfelt thank you to our community, to our first responders, to our healthcare professionals, to our grocery store workers, and to everyone that's really helping and doing their part right now. I know that the city staff has been working tirelessly to make sure that residents continue to be served with our core services. I know my colleagues on council, the mayor, have been attending numerous meetings and working hard to make sure that we all advocate for the best interests of our community. Please remember to let us know if you have concerns, needs, or comments during this period of time. All members of council are accessible. Our contact information is on our website. And a hearty thanks to our city manager for helping steer the organization through these uncharted waters.
Other comments from council? Wanted to remind everyone we had an opportunity this morning. I conducted another of the weekly sessions with the Westminster Chamber this morning. As a part of that comment, we talked about the new RISE program that Westminster kicked off at 8 o'clock this morning. And within the first hour of that program being on the internet and available, we had over 100 applications turned in. Unfortunately, I did not get a chance to check it just before we came on tonight, but I expect that number has probably grown considerably since 9 o'clock this morning. So to Don Tripp, John Hall, and all the groups that worked to put this thing together and to get it out and ready for the public, we appreciate it. We'll continue to support people who are needing help with their landlords on rent payments, mortgage payments. Under the banks, we ask if you have problems with your lease tenants, please go to Colorado Legal Services as we continue to push information over there. Remind people that under the SBA program, the PPP program, to protect your payroll protection program, opened up this past Friday, was a week ago. We know that is moving forward. The chamber representatives and I were looking earlier today to trying to find the new one for the 1099 and independent contractors from the SBA. We could not find an active link. What we did find, however, were a number of what appear to be bogus links. So we caution anyone who types into these links to verify that they've got the right address. Most of them, if you're going to SBA, will have a .gov behind them. If they don't, then it's probably not a good, safe place for you to be putting personal or business information. So double check where you're putting your information, make sure you're on the right sites. If there are no other comments by City Council, I will now turn to the consent agenda. This consent agenda is a group of routine matters to be acted on with a single motion and vote. At this time, I will ask if there is any members of the council that wish to have an item removed for further consideration. Please let me know through the chat line. Mr. D'Amato, you making the motion, or are you just
Looking to do the motion? I don't have any problems with it.
okay? Just to verify. I see no one who has an issue. There we have items 8A, B, C, and D for the consent agenda. Mr. Demott, if you would then make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the city council adopt consent agenda items 8A through 8D.
Mr. Seymour?
I second that motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Ms. Smith, you said you had a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just looking at the hail damage and the timing of when that would be conducted. Do we have a estimated time on that? I know it said by the end of December. I'm just concerned if it would happen again, would it still fall under our current insurance quotes?
Mr. Tripp, do you have someone online that can answer the question on item B?
This is Marty. I can help answer that.
Marty,
Go ahead,
please.
Marty.
So the insurance goes by date of loss. So we have a claim set up with CIRSA for this date of loss in 2018. And they have evaluated all of the roofs of all of the city facilities. So if we were to get another storm in before all the repairs were completed, our insurance company and the appraisers would be able to determine what was pre-existing under the 2018 claim and what might be new under a new claim for 2020.
Very good. Thank you so much. That's all my questions.
Are there any other questions on this item, on item 8? Seeing none, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by aye.
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 My fault. I'm jumping ahead. Ms. Parker, this does recall a roll call vote since we're not in public.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor Atchison?
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Councilor Demott?
Yes.
Demott votes yes. Mayor Pro Tem Sights?
Yes.
Sights votes yes. Councilor Seymour?
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Councilor Scully?
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Councilor Smith?
Yes.
Smith votes yes. And Councilor Bowles?
Yes.
Bowles votes yes.
All right, thank you. The motion is therefore carried on a 7-0 vote. Next item on the agenda is appointments and resignations, which we have none tonight. We will now move on to the public hearings and other new business. First item up, it will be Councilor's Bill number 10. This is an emergency ordinance authorizing the refunding of the city's water and wastewater utility enterprise taxable water and wastewater revenue bonds. Sites, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to pass Councilor's Bill number 10 as an emergency ordinance authorizing the refunding of City of Westminster water and wastewater utility enterprise taxable water and wastewater revenue bonds, Series 2010, in a par amount not to exceed $21,780,000.
Ms. Smith?
Second.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Are there any questions on this particular item? Ms. Scully?
No, sir, I was trying to make a second.
Okay. All right. Mr. Bowles, did you have a question?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
It's my understanding from the packet that I just want to confirm that staff's work on this is going to save us close to $3.5 million through this refunding.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes, Councilor Bowles, yes, particularly to summarize for folks that don't have the packet in front of them. This is, we're in some very unusual financial times in our country with extraordinarily low interest rates. The current market conditions provide an opportunity to significantly reduce the city's future debt service by refunding the taxable water and wastewater revenue bonds, Series 2010. That's what's on the agenda tonight. And this is to the benefit of the ratepayer. The bonds that are being refunded are slightly under $22 million, but the savings is $3.4 million, or over 15% of that refunded amount. So it's a terrific thing. I know you've seen these in front of you before, Council, and I just want to and would give credit to where it's due here to our finance staff, Tammy Hitchens and Bob Eyerhoff, and Christine Gray from Public Works and Utilities for keeping a close eye on these things and saving our ratepayers money in the future.
Mr. Tripp, thank you for that. And I just want to commend staff for bringing this forward and saving our ratepayers almost $3.5 million. I think that's excellent. That's a tremendous effort. So I appreciate that. I have one follow-up question though. Doing it now, what would be the benefit? Doing it now versus waiting and maybe we get even a better rate. How do we kind of determine that?
I'm going to ask Tammy or Bob if they're available to jump on the call here. I would tell you that our recommendation is to approve this evening as an emergency, which gives them the latitude to act immediately. We don't have any reason to believe they're going to be lower. That doesn't mean that they won't, but when you're at historically low rates as we are, the chances of them going up are more than going down. Tammy or Bob, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, this is Tammy Hitchens, the finance director. And you're exactly right, Don, that, we don't know, we don't have a crystal ball to know which way the rates are going, but it is probably more likely that they would go up rather than down. And what this does is it just provides us to be, have the ability that when it's time to pull the trigger, so to speak, that we have council's approval to do so. Again, it's going to save approximately $3.5 million. And the other part of it is that we are not extending the debt out any time. It's going to mature at the same time that it was going to before we refund it.
Ms. Hitchens, thank you for that answer, and Mr. Tripp, you too. Thank you, staff, for bringing this forward. This is a tremendous effort. Thank you. That's all I have.
Ms. Smith, you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Don or Tammy, kind of along the same lines as Councilor Voles, can you walk me through this process? Because it wasn't entirely clear to me. I understand now that it's a refinance. So we're refunding 21 million, just under 22 million, to save 3.5 million for our ratepayers. Is that how I understand it?
Tammy, go ahead, please.
Yes, that is correct. Basically, all that this is doing is we will pay less over the remaining term of the bonds than we would pay if we don't do this.
Okay. And so with the refinance, is that refunding 21 millions that would go to such things as capital projects for our water utility?
Yes, so these bonds were the ones that we are refunding were originally issued in 2010. And some of the projects that we built with this and Christine and Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, but part of it was the dewatering facility out at the Big Dry Creek. The other was the Little Dry Creek Interceptor sewer, I believe, and some large projects like that. So we're just paying this money back now. We've already, we've already done or in the process of doing these capital projects. All we're doing is it's like refinancing your house. And in the end, you still have the same house, you have the same projects, but you're just paying less for it.
Okay. I'm with all of the projects that we have with water utilities, I'm just concerned. I appreciate what we're doing as far as putting our taxpayer dollars first and getting the 3.5 million back. But I'm just concerned that it doesn't equate then to our water rate increases that we're then proposing for all of our constituents. So,
the only thing I'd say, Councilor, would be that whenever we can save money or generate new revenue, that's part of the overall picture that allows us to move forward with necessary work that we all decide on doing at a lower rate increase. So saving money really does impact future rates because you haven't set those beyond 2021.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tripp.
Yeah, just a reminder, we're not getting money back. We're just preventing having to pay as much money for the bonds as we would pay if we don't do this refinance. So there's not a return of dollars. We still owe the same amount on the bonds. We're just not paying as much interest.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Sykes, you had a comment?
Make sure I'm unmuted here. Sorry about that. I did also want to compliment staff and make sure that my understanding is clear. So this is a refinance on bonding that we did in 2010 that we've already spent the dollars on important capital projects. However, this was an opportunity for them without lengthening the time period of our loan to save through lowered payments a net amount of a little over $3.4 million. And so anytime there's savings, since it's an enterprise account, my understanding is that helps the overall system and would lower our need for, not remove, but lower the need for rate increases for future bonding capacity. So I have to say, I really appreciate the effort and the work and the thought that went into this. And for anyone who's listening that's wondering why we would do this as an emergency ordinance, this is contemplated in our charter. This does, which gives us the authority to do emergency ordinances when it's a matter of fiscal health for the city. And so just want to say thank you to everyone who worked on this to allow us to be nimble and to capture this, I guess, advantageous interest rate.
Mr. DeMott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem Sites kind of said some of what I was going to say, but since I already put my name in the chat box, I guess the point I would make that to both of your points is I'm glad to see this for the reason of it does help drive down ongoing costs. So it does save money. Maybe it's not money we directly get, but it's money we're not going to have to pay out. And so since I continuously ask and I see staff trying to find ways where we could lessen the need to increase rates, I do appreciate staff working quickly to jump on this and have that $3.5 million savings.
Are there other comments from council? If not, Ms. Parker, would you start with a roll call vote on item 10A1?
Apologies. Let me unmute myself and try that again. Councillor DeMott,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Sites,
Yes.
Councillor Seymour,
Yes.
Councillor Scully,
Yes.
Councillor Smith,
Yes.
Councillor Voles, Mayor, I'll come back to Councillor Voles. It looks like he may be having another connection issue. Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
All right, if you can please stand by so we can complete the roll call. Thank you for your patience, Mayor, while we're trying to get Councillor Voles back on.
Yeah, he says he's off again.
City Clerk, Michelle Parker, could you hear me now?
Yes. Yes, we can.
I don't,
Thank
I,
you,
I don't know
Counselor.
what's going on my end. I'm getting kicked off regularly. I don't know what to do. And I would say to the last motion, yes.
Thank you, Counselor Vols.
Sorry about that, everyone. I don't know what's happening on my end. I'm not touching anything or doing anything. It's,
Mr. Vols, would it be prudent, since we're just starting on this, for us to take a short pause and let you maybe get someplace that has a stronger connection?
I don't think the connection's the issue. I actually have a pretty strong connection here right now.
Okay, let's go on then. All right, that completes item A1. Ms. Seitz, would you take item 10A2, please? Councilor's Bill number 11.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I move to pass Councilor's Bill number 11 as an emergency ordinance appropriating $21,780,000 in the utility fund for the 2020 refunding proceeds.
Ms. Smith,
Second.
I have a motion and a second for Councilor's Bill number 11. Is there any comment or questions by council on this item? Seeing none, Ms. Parker, would you do a roll call on item 10A2, Councilor's Bill number 11?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem Seitz.
Yes.
Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Counselor Scully.
Yes.
Counselor Smith.
Yes.
Counselor Vols.
Yes.
Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Counselor DeMott.
Yes.
Did you get an answer from Councilor Smith?
Yes, sir. I show that all members of council voted yes.
Okay, thank you very much. This motion then therefore carries on a 7-0 vote. The next item on the agenda will be a hold a public hearing by means of electronically submitted testimony. This is for the purpose of a public hearing on first reading on Council's Bill number 12, the right-of-way vacation of Church Ranch Boulevard adjacent to Church Ranch Home Place, filing number 10. Mr. Tripp, do you have someone on staff ready to make a presentation on this item?
No, sir, we have no presentation. This is the follow-up of a development item that has been previously approved, and it's a recommended right-of-way vacation as part of that. But we're sure happy to answer questions if council has any questions about this. This is the Church Ranch on Church Ranch Boulevard, adjacent to Church Ranch Home Place, and it's a project for senior housing.
Okay. Are there any questions from the council before we move to the public hearing? Seeing none, then I will open up the phone call to anyone in the public who has a comment they'd like to submit. And I will ask the city clerk and her staff to watch to see if we have anybody who has any comment. Have you received any testimony, Ms. Parker, in regards to this?
No, sir, we have not received any testimony from any member of the public regarding this public hearing.
Okay. At that point, then I will close the public hearing on Councilor's Bill number 12. And I will move the items to council if there are any last questions about this item before we move for a motion. Seeing none, then I will open up the floor for a motion for item 10B2, Councilor's Bill number 12. Mr. DeMott.
Get myself off mute. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to pass Councilor Bill number 12 on first reading. Vacation a portion of Church Ranch Boulevard rights of way adjacent to Church Ranch Home Place, filing number 10.
Ms. Smith.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for Council's Bill number 12. Is there any discussion in regards to this council bill? Seeing none, I will move Ms. Parker. This is a roll call vote for Council's Bill number 12.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Counselor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Counselor Smith?
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Counselor Bowles?
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. Mayor Atchison?
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Counselor Demott?
Yes.
Demott votes yes. Mayor Pro Tem Sights?
Yes.
Sights votes yes.
Thank you, ma'am. This motion carries on a 7-0 vote. Moving on to the next item, Council's Bill number 13 on first reading, appropriating grant funds to be received from the Denver Regional Council of Government. This is item 10C on your agenda. Ms. Scully, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to pass Councilors Bill number 13 on first reading appropriating grant funds to be received from the Denver Regional Council of Governments for the Sheridan Boulevard Multimodal Transportation Improvement Project.
Ms. Sights?
Second.
I have a motion and a second on Council's Bill number 13. Is there any comments from council on this item? Mr. Bowles, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want folks to know how important this is with connectivity in our city. This is something that went through the Denver Regional Council of Governments, and we competed as a competitive process with cities and towns in our area, and this came up as the #1 project. So this is a project that connects our downtown to the RTD station, and it's really important. And then the bike trail also, one of the very few remaining above ground bike path connections that goes over a busy street like Sheridan Boulevard. This will go under Sheridan Boulevard. So this is a very important project, and I will be very glad to vote for this tonight. Thank you. That's all I have.
Ms. Sykes? Okay, thank you, Ms. Sykes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had to just highlight that this has been a multi-year effort from the city of Westminster. This project is incredibly important, and we have been advocating at a federal and state and regional level for this project for many years. I do think our mayor deserves a lot of credit for spearheading that effort. I myself went to Washington, D.C. and spoke to our delegation about this project at least 4 or 5 years ago. So I will join in Councilor Vol's enthusiasm in voting yes for this tonight. Secondly, I do think it's important to highlight that this will be $2 million of Westminster money, but we will have over $6 million of matching funds coming in from CDOT, federal government, and other sources. So this is a very exciting opportunity to invest in our community.
Ms. Smith, you have a comment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, both a comment and a question. So I'm just echoing what Councilor Bowles and Mayor Pro Tem Sights have just said, and I think this is important for many reasons. As y'all know, transportation is near and dear to my heart, and this is a great connectivity piece for our city. So with that, and Mr. Mayor, I don't know if this is a question for you or for Mr. Frankel, but would this put me in a conflict of interest voting on this, on these items tonight, as I do work for the Regional Transportation District and will be involved in the execution of, if this does move forward, I will be involved in the execution and operation piece of this.
There is no financial gain for you or RTD because neither of you or RTD is involved in the funding for this project.
Okay.
So,
So
Mr. Mayor, this is Dave Frankel. I would agree. I would ask whether you have a direct financial interest in this project, and I don't understand that you do. So I wouldn't advise that you have a conflict for voting on today's action item.
No financial interest here. I'll just be working on the execution of it.
In terms of normal duties with your job there.
Correct, as an operational piece, yes.
Okay. No, I wouldn't necessarily. I wouldn't characterize that as having a direct financial interest in the council decision tonight.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, Thank you.
And that's
Ms.
all.
Scully, you have, okay. All right, thank you, Ms. Smith. Ms. Scully?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to echo what the prior counselors have also said about thanking everybody for their work on this, but I'd also like to add that this is such an important connection in our city. I hope to see more of this type of planning in our city because I love the idea of utilizing going under roads and cutting the traffic on the overpasses. I think that's a great idea. And so just to put that plug out there, keep up the good work, city and staffers, and please continue to think in this direction. I like it. Thank you.
Are there any other comments in regards to Council's Bill number 13? Seeing no other comments, Ms. Parker, Council's Bill number 13 is for a roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Counselor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Counselor Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Counselor Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Counselor DeMott.
Yes.
DeMott votes yes. Mayor Pro Tem Sights.
Yes.
Sights votes yes. Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes.
Thank you, Council. That motion passes on a 7-0 vote. The next item up is Council's Bill number 14. Mr. Bowles, if you would, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to pass Council's Bill number 14 on first reading to approve the implementation of parking restrictions in the downtown Westminster and Westminster Station parking areas.
Ms. Scully,
I second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any questions or comments by council? Mr. DeMott, your question,
Thank you.
please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my question is around like actual, so this moves forward and it gives you the right to kind of start setting the restrictions for those areas. How is the process with actual restrictions as far as like what time limits? And the reason I ask is I had a resident contact me about our electric car parking in the TOD. And his concern was that we had a limit on those spaces, whereas if he drove to the TOD, plugged his car in, and then took the train downtown like he usually does, he wouldn't be able to use that charging spot. So it just kind of got my mind jogging as far as like how those parts of the policy will be made, and is that something council will be consulted on, or is that just something moving forward that staff is going to work on?
Mr. Tripp.
Certainly. Councilor DeMott, I'm going to ask Dave Downing to speak to the operating kind of principles and guidelines, which we've, I think, had in a previous presentation on how parking in the TOD would be managed. But I just want to point out this item tonight, what it actually does is it moves in the municipal code the enforcement of that from the police department to the community development department to be consistent with how we're managing the garage there. But your question about some of the detail on how those decisions will get made, the director of the department is Dave Downing, and he's got staff here too. But Dave, would you mind jumping in on this?
Sure, Don. This is Dave Downing. I'm going to answer the specific questions, which I'm not sure we have answers for yet. I'm going to call upon our parking coordinator, Wadi Burgos. He is on the line, but I might add before Wadi jumps in, this is going to be a dynamic thing. We're going to do what's best for the businesses and the visitors and the residents of the downtown area and the TOD. So anything we do doesn't necessarily have to be etched in stone. But Wadi, if you want to jump in and add to that, please.
So maybe Dave, before you leave, or Dave or Wadi both, I think part of the question comes around how that gets governed. Will a set of regulations come back to the council to be reviewed and acted on, or is that something under the city manager's authority?
Hi everyone, this is Wadi Burgess, Parking and Transportation Management Coordinator. So to answer that question, some specific regulations and decisions will be made by the Community Development Department. There are certain issues like a fine schedule for violations of the code that will come back to council for a resolution to decide on those specific issues. Operational issues and say how a parking garage for the on-street parking is managed. To speak to that specific item as it relates to electric vehicle parking, one of the things that we presented to council before about is that we are implementing a shared parking strategy. So what's working right now, say in the TOD area where about 95% of the spaces are being utilized by RTD users, it's not something that might work 1 or 2 years down the road, because we have a development that's breaking ground now, and we have more developments that are coming into the TOD area. So there's going to be a different composition of the users that are actually utilizing parking in those areas. So what we're going to do is make sure that the access to all the parking is equitable, meaning that there is going to be designated spaces for electric vehicle charging for those RTD users that generally are going to park for longer periods of time because they are parking in the garage and then going to school in downtown Denver or going to work for the whole day, where we have other users like residents or visitors of those businesses that are going to be in the first floor of those developments that are going to be more transient. So they're going to park only for 1 hour, 2 hours, and then move. So the general idea as far as the restrictions for the on-street parking is we're going to have a 2-hour restriction on the on-street parking from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and then 3 hours all other times, Monday through Saturdays, and then no restrictions on Sundays and holidays. So there's going to be some other details, and like Dave mentioned, this is going to be dynamic. We're going to be able to collect a lot of data and make adjustments on what work for the community, that being the businesses, that being the general public, that being visitors, or anybody that's utilizing that public right away. So the goal here is to make sure that the offering of these assets is working for everybody and not just one specific group individually.
Great. I'm really glad to hear that answer because, I mean, with our goal of sustainability, it makes sense to be able to allow people to park and then go downtown and stuff. So I'm glad to hear that. And I hope that at some point we'll get another study session as you kind of start baking the solution and seeing what it's going to be, just so council at least is aware of kind of what you guys have come up with all your hard work. The last thing, Mr. Tripp, that I wanted to ask, can you remind me, if this move this to this other department, is that kind of consistent with what we did with code enforcement? Am I right in remembering that that's what we did with that department as well?
We did. At the request of both department directors, it seemed like the activities that would include this sort of enforcement and then other kinds of enforcement that are on individual properties fit better in CD. So both the directors came to me some time ago after a study of this and asked to make that move, which we put into the budget, that you approved last year. So it is, though, it's consistent. And I think the additional overlay is that CD, through WADI and having the parking management program, will have the management of the parking in the garage and on the streets that impact that parking in the garage.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Tripp.
Mr. Seymour.
All my questions were answered. Thank you.
Ms. Smith.
Thank you. Mr. Tripp, this is a follow-up question to Councilor DeMott's, but one of my questions in the packet was, do we have enough staff in community development to handle the parking enforcement that we're now adding on to their job responsibilities?
Dave Downing, go ahead and talk a little bit about the structure of how you plan to manage this moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Don. Again, I'll have Wadi jump in and talk about initially how this will be handled and his how he envisions in the future also.
Thanks, Dave. Again, this is Wadi Burgess, Parking and Transportation Management Coordinator. So the staff for the initial deployment and management of the program will be contracted staff, at least for the initial 2 to 3 years. We look into the performance in the next couple of years and how the action plan is actually deployed, and we collect enough data, then we can look into bringing that staff on board with the city. But the proposal here is to have that staff contracted, and we currently have a contractor under contract that will assist us with implementing this program.
Ms. Smith, does that answer your question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Mr. Voles?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a question. Do we anticipate this to be the violations from the parking to fund the overall program? I mean, will it be a self-funded program eventually with violations paying for the management of parking in those areas?
So you mentioned the violations. Obviously, there'll be additional revenue as it relates parking fees. But yes, our goal is for this program to be sustainable within 5 to 7 years. Obviously, with the current conditions and what's going on in the business environment right now, it's a little difficult to project the revenue, as Larry and everybody else will tell you. But yes, the goal of the program is to be self-sustainable. What we projected initially was 5 to 7 years. We'll see, with social distancing and kind of return to some sort of normalcy of what things look like by the end of 2020 and beyond that. But yes, the short answer to your question is yes. The goal is for this program to be self-sustainable, as there is more development in those areas, and there is, the demand for parking increases and more revenue comes in. The goal is for the program to be self-sustainable.
Very good. And then my follow-up question was what kind of a time frame we were looking at. You said 5 to 7 years, so that answers that. Thank you. That's all I have.
Any other questions from council? Wadi, a couple of the questions I received from the public. One is kind of a follow-up to Mr. DeMont's earlier question. I don't think we're anticipating that someone comes in and plugs into an electric charging station and leaves it for the day, tying it up for one car all day. Would that be correct?
No, right now what we have in place is restrictions that would allow an individual user to park a vehicle for 4 hours. So, and that's kind of a standard that you will find across the country, where the majority of the spaces, unless it's a private space that's limited to workplace charging or anything like that, you will have a time limit for charging stations. Just because they're so scarce, they're so limited, we want to make sure that those are shared.
And another one that we've discussed as a council on a number of occasions in the past, it's our intent to also, in the near future, put some of those charging stations out on the street so they're not all internal to the garage. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. And there is opportunities that we've been looking at, and there's some grants that we received in the past from the Regional Quality Council that we can explore. So we've been looking at options, and I'll work with Paul from the city manager's office to find opportunities to make this more accessible as the demand for electric charging stations continue to grow. And we continue to explore options to achieve our sustainability goals in the city.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions for council on Council's Bill number 14? Seeing none, Ms. Parker, this is a roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Counselor Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Counselor Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Counselor Demott.
Yes.
Demott votes yes. Mayor Pro Tem Sights.
Yes.
Sights votes yes. Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. And Counselor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes.
Thank you, Council. This motion, Council's Bill number 14 passes on a 7-0 vote. Moving on to the next item, this is Council's Bill number 15. Mr. Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to pass Councilor Bill number 15 on first reading, appropriating funds from the state Colorado's Department of Human Services Office of Behavioral Health Co-Responder Services Program Grant in the amount of $190,000 in 2020.
Ms. Smith.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for Councilor's Bill number 15. Are there any comments or questions on this item? Mr. Bowles?
I think Mr. Demott had one before me. Do you?
Go ahead. I'm trying to steal back
so
behind it there.
I guess my question is, this is an amazing program, and I'm very glad to see this. I support it 110%. I'm curious, how will we know if this is a successful program? How are we going to analyze how effective this is and how positive it is at the end?
Mr. Tripp, you want to refer this to someone?
Councilor Bowles, we've got both Deputy Todd Reeves and Chief Tim Carlson on the line. We'll let them decide how they want to handle these questions. Go ahead, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp and Council. Good evening. This is Tim Carlson, the Chief of Police. I will defer the specific questions to Deputy Chief Reeves, as he's worked intimately with this program for the past several months. So I'll pass that one on to him.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Councilor Bowles and all of Council. This is Todd Reeves, Deputy Police Chief. To answer that specific question, there is an enormous amount of metrics and data that we're going to combine over the period of the first 6 months, and then redirect those metrics to ensure we're encapsulating exactly what our community needs. And then we have requirements to report back to the state that they can compare those metrics with to ensure that it's a quality program that's getting the needs of the community met.
Very good. Thank you. Of course, that was a great answer, and thanks for your work on this. I appreciate it. That's all I have.
All right, Mr. Demott, sorry I jumped over yours.
No, you're fine. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to actually give kudos for this coming forward, and for the PD and the staff working hard to find ways that we can address mental health needs in our community. I know this was something that we recently, in the last couple of years since I've been on council, added to our strategic plan as a goal, and something that we were going to go after is more resources for mental health. So I'm just really glad to see this and happy to vote yes on it.
Ms. Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just echoing what my fellow colleagues have mentioned. This is such a great program for our community. I'm so proud that we are implementing this within our police department and being able to utilize this. One quick question, are these, I know this kind of runs through, I believe it was 2022 as a third year option. Is this a grant that can be applied for in years? If this is running successfully in our city, can we apply again for this particular grant?
Thank you, Councilor, for that. Todd Reeves again. Yes, we can apply for this same grant for up to 5 years, and it's in 2-year cycles. So we're already beginning to collect information so we can start submitting a grant for years 2022 and 2023.
Great, thank you so much.
Ms. Sights?
Thank you. I think everyone has asked a bit of my questions. I do have to say I agree. I'm I'm delighted and excited for us to launch this program. And I do appreciate the advocacy of my colleagues on council, particularly Councilor DeMont and Councilor Scully, for pushing our efforts on mental health awareness and action and advocacy. I do have a question. I'm looking forward to, I guess, presentations on the success of this program, if it is successful in the future. And I hope that if it proves out, that it might become a permanent fixture with or without grant support. But I guess that's more of a comment than a question, but I do hope that will be presented kind of as it goes along, how it's played out, and hopefully it is as successful as I anticipate it will be.
Other comments from council? Seeing none, is the roll call vote for Council Bill number 15, Ms. Parker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Councilor DeMont.
Yes.
DeMont votes yes. Mayor Pro Tem Sites.
Yes. Yes.
Sites votes yes. Councilor Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Councilor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Councilor Smith.
Yes.
And Councilor Smith votes yes.
Based on the count, that is a 7-0 vote for items E1, Council's Bill number 15. Mr. Seymour, would you take the second half of that, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move, based on the recommendation of the city manager, to find in the public interest would be best served by authorizing the sole source contract with Community Reach Center, Inc. for co-responder services in an amount not to exceed $171,160 in 2020, renewable up to 2 additional one-year periods, subject to annual appropriations for 2021 and 2022 in amounts not to exceed $350,000 each year.
Ms. Smith?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second for item E2 under item number 10. Is there any other comments or questions from council? Seeing none, Ms. Parker?
Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Councilor DeMont.
Yes.
DeMont votes yes. Mayor Pro Tem Sites.
Yes. I apologize. I was muted.
Sites votes yes. Councilor Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Councilor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Councilor Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. And Councilor Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes.
Thank you, council. This is item 10E2. This is on a 7-0 vote. Motion is carried. Moving to the next item, 10F1 for the adoption of resolution number 9. Ms. Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to adopt resolution number 9, authorizing the city manager to execute an intergovernmental agreement between the city of Westminster and the Colorado Department of Transportation pertaining to the city's receipt of $6,640,859 million from the state for the Sheridan Boulevard Multimodal Transportation Improvement Project.
Ms. Scully?
Second.
I have a motion and a second for item F1 for resolution number 9. Is there any comments or questions on this item? I don't see anyone who had a comment. I had a bunch of people that wanted to make a motion though. Moving on, there are no comments on this one. Ms. Parker, this is resolution number 9. Would you take the roll, please?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Councilor DeMont.
Yes.
DeMont votes yes. Mayor Pro Tem Sites.
Yes.
Sites votes yes. Councilor Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Counselor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Counselor Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Counselor Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes, and Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes.
Council has voted on a 7-0 vote to pass resolution number 9. Moving on to the second half of this, Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to authorize the payment of $2 million to the project as part of the local agency matching funds requirement.
Ms. Scully.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for item 10F2. Are there any comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, Ms. Parker, this is the roll call vote, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Sights.
Yes.
Sights votes yes. Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Counselor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Counselor Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Counselor Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Counselor DeMott.
Yes.
And DeMott votes yes.
Council has voted on a 7-0 vote to pass item 10F2 on the payment of the authorization of $2 million to the project. With that, the motion carries on a 7-0 vote. Next item on the agenda is item 10G. This is resolution number 10. And Ms. Sights.
Thank you. I move to adopt resolution number 10, authorizing the city manager to accept the Transportation Improvement Program grant from the Denver Regional Council of Governments and a Highway Safety Improvement grant from the Colorado Department of Transportation for the Sheridan Boulevard Multimodal Transportation Improvement Project.
Ms. Smith.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the adoption of resolution number 10. Are there any comments or questions by council? Seeing none, there's a roll call vote. Ms. Parker for resolution number 10.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Counselor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Counselor Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Counselor Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Counselor DeMott.
Yes.
DeMott votes yes. Mayor Pro Tem Sights.
Yes.
Sights votes yes.
On item resolution number 10, the motion is carried on a 7-0 vote by the council. Next item on the agenda is item 10H. This is a move to adopt resolution number 11. Ms. Scully, I have you up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to adopt resolution number 11 concerning making reasonable accommodations to residents affected by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Ms. Sights.
Second. Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second for items number 10H under resolution number 11. I'll open the item at this time for comments. Mr. Bowles.
I just think this is an important, I guess one question I have before I say anything, did we get input, a public input on this particular item on the agenda tonight?
Yes, we did. I'll bring that up as soon as we get it in for discussions through the city clerk as well.
Okay.
Do you have any other comments? Go ahead.
No, I don't. Thank you.
Ms. Seiss, do you have comments?
No, that was just me. I do have comments here in a little bit, but that was just me trying to allow someone else to second it. So I apologize.
That's all right. Ms. Scully, do you have a comment?
I do, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank Mayor Pro Tem Anita Sights for, she really pushed this through for us last week. She had looked at a similar thing that another city had done and really recommended that we do this. And I just really appreciate it. When I read through this, this is exactly what many of us on council have been kind of pushing for a couple of weeks, as ways to alleviate some of the pressures from our residents who may suddenly find themselves without jobs and having to face trying to pay rent and trying to pay mortgage and utilities. This is really a great resolution to alleviate some of those pressures. So I thank the city for helping us put this resolution together and get it on our agenda tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a specific concern about the second bullet point where City Council requests state federal action to provide ongoing financial assistance to families and individuals and enact a formal suspension of rents, mortgages, utility, and telecommunication service payments. And then following on in the paragraph, I'm deeply concerned about where this, first of all, where we have no precedent for this. Maybe encouraging is a better word, but I also am very concerned about taking a blanket overall approach and asking for the suspension of all rents, all mortgages, all payments. I believe that will substantially deepen the decline of our economy and will make it harder for us to come out of it when we are able to get out and about again. Not every person needs their rent or mortgage suspended. And then that's why I believe part one is more in line with our thoughts. My thoughts is asking people to work with their renters, work with their mortgage holders on an individual basis. So with that, I will not be supporting this.
Mr. Demott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When this came up last week, I had voiced the desire to be able to have something come before us that we all could get behind, and I tried to share some similar thoughts as Councilor Seymour, as far as what our role is, what our ability is, and frankly what the ability of government in general in this sort of action is. I absolutely would encourage landlords or banks who could take the action and are able to financially help people they're in contracts with to do so. I mean, this is a very hard time. We've never seen anything like it in my lifetime, and hopefully never do again. However, I am uncomfortable saying that we want state and federal action, again, not knowing if that's even legal. And likewise, there's a lot of trickle down problems that could come from this. I know a lot of property owners that, they're in no better position to say that they can't take rent than some of these renters might be in to not be able to give the rent. So every situation is a little bit different in the blanket statement, although I hope that people are able to come to agreement with their landlords and banks. I just don't think that this is going to be useful, nor do I think that we have the proper authority to even, neither do I think the state or the federal government has a right to be getting involved in these sort of agreements. If they want to come up with a package, that's a different thing, but the way this is worded, I'm uncomfortable with. I do appreciate what the council members who brought this forward are trying to show, and this is that we want everybody to be taken care of in this time. I've seen other municipalities be able to come up with some rent programs that they come out of the city budget, but this action that we're trying to do tonight, I can't support that second bullet, therefore I won't be supportive of this motion.
Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, thank you for counselors who have brought this forward. I think it is important to acknowledge that this is a very hard time for a lot of folks, but I don't think it is the proper role of government to be getting into private businesses and requesting and taking action in this regard. So I will not be supportive of this resolution. I would be more supportive of a letter encouraging kind of like what we've done in the past, but to take formal action on it, I'm not comfortable with, and I don't think it's our proper role. So I will not be voting. I'll be voting no on this.
Ms. Seitz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to all of my colleagues for their thoughtful discourse on this resolution, which is simply to ask the state and the federal government to act, because this is outside of our jurisdiction, and it is knowingly a resolution to try to encourage action. Last week, I was proud that my colleagues and I unanimously took swift action to assist small businesses that are feeling unprecedented pain due to the COVID crisis. But that pain does not begin and end with small business or large business. It's being felt throughout our community and through communities in the entire United States. We're seeing a huge surge in jobless claims. And I actually think we will see mass evictions or housing instability be a catalyst to further economic decline. There was a reason that this resolution also asks for the banks for assistance through this. I have had the opportunity in my past to be a landlord, and I definitely did not have extra cash flow that would have made it easy if I had to stop receiving rent. But this is a unique circumstance where we're asking everyone to look at ways that we can step up and support the overall global health of our community. And so this is just a resolution asking the state and the federal government to look for answers. I would be happy to look at ways we could massage the language if we could do it tonight. To get Councillor DeMont comfortable and Councillor Smith and Councillor Seymour. However, I feel that this is a resolution that says to our community and to the state, it's important that housing stability is not lost during this crisis. So I'm happy to support the resolution.
Mr. DeMott, before I come to you, I'm going to go back to original question raised by Councillor Voles. We did receive some comment on this from the Apartment Renters Association, and I'm going to turn that to the city clerk. Ms. Parker, can you advise us what we received from that?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. This afternoon, just after 3 p.m., maybe around 3:20, I submitted all of the public comment that we had received up until that time. And one of those communications came from an Andrew Hamrick, General Counsel and Senior VP of Government Affairs with the Apartment Association of Metro Denver and the Colorado Apartment Association. And it has also been attached to the electronic packet and it's posted online for any members of the public who would like to review that communication. And also he attached some edits or suggested edits to the resolution, which are also included as well.
Okay, thank you. Council, from my standpoint, we need to help each other as much as we can. Landlords, banks and stuff. The issue I had with the thing is it also included those who are not affected by COVID-19 of not having lost jobs, not having lost any pay, to ask to have their rent deferred as well. I support what we're trying to do, but I also support what Councillor Seitz indicated was try to get through this if we can, so that we can massage this thing to the point where we have it more acceptable to council. But to defer rent for people who don't need that deferral makes no sense to me, and I think it's punishing the landlords to the point where they're just being told to defer it regardless of the excuse. But I totally support anybody who's having lost jobs, furloughed from jobs, or are affected by this, asking the landlords, because we have no jurisdiction over this at the present time. But I would further be more interested in trying to massage the piece that mandates that people who don't have a financial problem should also have rent deferred. Since everyone's had an opportunity to go around at least once, I'll start again. Mr. DeMont.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I very much am pretty in line with what you just mentioned, with the addition that my other big objection is the state or the federal government actually forcing these actions. I don't think that they have the authority to do that. I think the other thing that, I would be open to is, state and federal action that helps those individuals, much like we've seen some municipalities do, or some of the stimulus package. So I'm not against encouraging them to help in these hard times. I just don't think, because even if they came and said, we the state or we the federal government, if they did have the right to do that, which I don't believe they do, that doesn't mean that every single bank or company or landlord would be able to do that. So again, I totally agree with you in spirit. I think that we're all on the same page, and I do hope that we could come up with some language that meets all our needs. Something that would meet what I just said, though, and kind of be a little less stringent on what we're asking the government to force would be more appealing to me.
Okay, Ms. Seitz.
Hi, I apologize. It looked like I was muted by the organizer for a second there. So I have a specific proposal then. Looking at the language, I guess I'm reading this differently than both the mayor, Councilor Seymour, and others, because it does specifically say at the last sentence, direct relief for small businesses, self-employed workers affected by this crisis. But we could be more explicit in that. And in the second bullet point, perhaps changing the word enact to encourage.
Okay. Ms. Scully, do you have a comment?
And let me just real quick,
Okay.
we could say folks that have proven job loss or financial hardship due to COVID-19, something that is very explicit, that it is related to the virus, that it is related to a true loss, and change the word to encourage to I think meet Councilor DeMont's concerns, Mayor, your concerns, and get to something that we can have at least a majority, but hopefully a unanimous support for.
Okay. Ms. Scully, do you want to add to that? Ms. Scully?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I was totally talking to myself. I just wanted to echo what Mayor Pro Tem Seitz said. I was looking for a way that we could come to consensus in some revisions so that we could all feel comfortable with this resolution and work for a way to pass it tonight.
Okay. Before I go around again, is there any other council member has a second comment? Okay, Mr. DeMont.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Ms. Mayor Pro Tem Seitz, for the recommendation. I think if you change the wording to encourage, I would be supportive of it. I would want to point out too, I think one of the other things that I find unique in the motion that I do like is the credit reporting piece. I mean, there's so many people right now that are, to no fault of their own, not able to work. And I think that that's something that's, can follow people around for a really long time. And I don't know how you accommodate that, but I definitely have a big heart or feeling for the fact that a lot of people are going to be put in that kind of situation, and however that can be mitigated. I hope that, the people who have debt with people take that into consideration. But I think if you change it to encourage, I would be able to support this.
Mr. Seymour. Are you on mute, Mr. Seymour?
Yes, I was. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I said was outstanding, so I'll just leave it at that. No. Number one, I'm good with if we can change that to encourage. Number two, that's where my big sticking point comes after families and individuals, the comma. The sticking part there is the formal suspension of rents. If we could look at what we did in paragraph 1, roll that down to paragraph 2 as far as encouraging, because that whole line, enact a formal and suspension of rents, mortgage, utility in their part, that's my sticking point right there. So if we could work that out and bring it in similar to what number 1 is without the blanket suspension, I would be able to find a way that we could work together on this tonight.
Okay. Ms. Smith, do you have another comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was nodding my head yes and talking to Councillor Seymour well. That's exactly what my sticking point was as well, is to enact a formal suspension. I'm for encouraging and recommending, but as far as a formal action, I am not comfortable with at all.
Okay. Ms. Parker, I want to come to you as the clerk right now. Do you have enough information on the wording, potential wording revisions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could, what I believe council is willing to do is to offer an amendment to passing resolution number 11 by changing the wording under paragraph 2 to read encourage a suspension of rents, mortgages, utility, etc., instead of enact a formal suspension of rents, mortgages, utility, etc. Is that correct?
I think the other part of that is it has to be something that can be shown to be COVID-19 related, not just everybody.
Okay.
Is that correct, what you're hearing, Ms. Sykes? And Ms. Sykes, you may be muted.
Again, my comments were brilliant. I'm sorry you all missed them. Sorry. That is correct, Mr. Mayor. I think that while I felt like it was encapsulated in that end of the sentence where it said affected, I can't have it open and have the WebEx and open, but I do believe that was already, but I think we could be more specific to just calm and address the concerns of my colleagues. So we could say something that more specifically talks about financial hardship due to the provable financial hardship due to COVID-19.
And that there's also a recommendation.
I would say encourage. Yeah, encourage is fine. I think encourage is a good word because it allows for innovation and creativity, and so it might be state or federal financial assistance to those parties.
Okay. Mr. Frankel, we have a question for you. Still with us?
Yes, I am. I was taking notes throughout your discussions, and I may be able to help with some language on alternate number 2, for paragraph number 2 that you've been deliberating on. I'm going to email it to council now, and if it's acceptable, I'm glad to read it into the record.
All right, while you're doing that, we have an actual question for you from Councilor Smith.
Please do.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Frankel. May I ask, what is the difference if we write a letter to our state and to our federal governments versus creating an actual resolution? Can you walk me through what the legalities are on the difference of a written letter versus a resolution?
Well, the intent of a resolution of this sort is to advocate for policies, and specifically its policies in section number 2 that would be considered at the state and federal level. Whether a letter versus a resolution, I think if a letter were to be sent on behalf of the city, I think it would be helpful if you could come to some consensus as to the content of a letter. And perhaps a resolution is a more formal way of just on the record in an open meeting, reaching some consensus, and the document represents the will of the city council. So in the end, I think since the resolution is here for your consideration, it may be the best way for council to discuss whether you can reach consensus on these issues.
Thank you. That clears up my question. Thank you very much.
All right, I would ask council to refer to your email that Mr. Frankel just sent to you on the proposed language for paragraph number 2. Does everyone have that?
And I can read it into the record now as you're reviewing that. I just didn't want you to have to listen to every word and not have it written in front of you at the same time. One way potentially to reach consensus here would be for paragraph 2 to change to the following. The City Council requests state and federal action to provide ongoing financial assistance and direct relief to families, individuals, small businesses, and self-employed workers affected by this crisis, and encourage a formal suspension of rents, mortgages, utility, and telecommunication service payments for both residential and commercial property, suspend negative credit reporting for non-payment of rents, mortgages, utilities, and telecommunication services, period. That's the end of the draft language that I've sent to you.
Okay. Is there any comment from any of the council members regarding what could be proposed as a amendment to the motion? Ms. Scully? You may be muted, Ms. Scully.
Tell you, I'm having wonderful conversations by myself. I was wondering if there was a way we maybe should consider adding the words COVID-19 in there. I believe that was some of the concern, is that it didn't specifically state that.
Mr. Frankel, back to you.
Absolutely. Where it refers to this crisis, that could be substituted for the COVID-19 crisis.
I would be more comfortable with that.
Okay, let me go down to the next comment. Ms. Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would request to not have the request in there. I think that was one of the other sticking points of the first one, is that City Council encourages state and federal action. I know we also said encourages a formal suspension as well, but that request is a sticky one for me. So.
All right, Mr. DeMott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just thinking through what Councilor Smith just said, honestly. I actually am probably comfortable with it either way, just because the way I read this anyway is the request is to have them provide assistance opposed to them forcing individuals to provide assistance. And so I think that this would roughly meet my objections.
All right, Ms. Sykes.
I agree with Councilor DeMont's assessment that requests state and federal action is appropriate, particularly since we're asking them to encourage. So I would like the word request to stay in there at the beginning. I think this is a request for us to get help for these affected individuals. And I agree with Councilor Scully. I think the mayors and Councilor Seymour did have concerns about it not being specific enough about who is eligible for these. So I think the fix there that City Attorney Frankel came up with would be perfect.
All right, Mr. Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too with the revisions because it ties the first part to state and federal action and financial assistance. And then while it still says formal suspension of rents, I believe because we have a comma rather than a period in there, we'll link those two together for the first part. So I could support this in its current form.
All right, any other questions or comments by council? The only one I think is still on the table, Mr. Frankel, is being specific to the COVID-19 as mentioned by Councilor Scully. You have a spot to put that in there, and then we'll see if we can still get past this one.
I do, and I've made that edit, and I will transmit it now.
Okay. While that's being done, Ms. Smith, do you have another comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, this doesn't entirely sit well with me. I understand what we're trying to accomplish as a council and looking at our community and trying to help in any way we can. So while I'm not entirely comfortable on the wording, I will follow with my colleagues to support this for the greater good of Westminster.
Okay. Can everyone take a look at alternate number 2 as just submitted by the city attorney before I come back around again? So I'll give you a minute to look at that.
And I'm glad to read it into the record, Mr. Mayor, so that all that are listening can understand the way it reads. Right now, it's drafted.
A second to read it. Go ahead,
Mr.
Frank.
Would it be okay? Okay, the language is, the City Council requests state and federal action to provide ongoing financial assistance and direct relief to families, individuals, small businesses, and self-employed workers affected by the COVID-19 crisis, and encourage a formal suspension of rents, mortgages, utility, and telecommunications service payments for both residential and commercial property, suspend negative credit reporting for non-payment of rents, mortgages, utilities, and telecommunications services.
All right, Mr. Vols, you're up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support that. We've kind of been around on this. I supported the original resolution as it was drafted, but I think it's so important for us to try to find a way to come together as a full team and have consensus and compromise. So I would support what was just read. Thank you.
All right. While I'm giving everyone else a chance to go back to the original motion makers, Ms. Scully, would you accept the amendment that's been offered?
I would, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Seitz, would you second the amendment that's been offered?
Yes.
Okay, I have a second. I have a motion maker and the second. Both have agreed to the alternate language that's been proposed through the city attorney. Has everyone had a chance to look at that? Seeing no objection coming up, then I will move the motion forward as resolution number 11 as amended, that was made by Councilor Scully and seconded by Councilor Seitz. At this time, I will turn to the city clerk and ask for a roll call for resolution number 11 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. Councilor Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Councilor Vols.
Yes.
Vols votes yes. Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Councilor DeMott.
Yes.
DeMott votes yes. Mayor Pro Tem Seitz.
Yes.
Sights votes yes, and Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes.
And resolution number 11 is carried on a 7-0 vote by the City Council. We will move on to the next item. Next item on the agenda is an authorization to execute an internal agreement, intergovernmental agreement with the Urban Drainage and Flood Control District. Mr. DeMott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to authorize the city manager to execute an intergovernmental agreement with Urban Drainage and Flood Control District doing business as Mile High Flood District to update the floodplain hydraulic model of Walnut Creek watershed.
Ms. Scully.
I second.
I have a motion and a second for item 10I. Is there comments or questions from council? Seeing none, Ms. Parker, roll call vote for item 10I, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Counselor Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes. Counselor Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Counselor DeMott.
Yes.
DeMott votes yes. Mayor Pro Tem Sights.
Yes.
Sights votes yes. Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. And Counselor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes.
Motion is carried by the council on a 7-0 vote. Moving to the next item. Item 10J, an authorization to execute First Amendment to the agreement to furnish parking management services. This is Ms. Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to authorize the city manager to execute the First Amendment to the agreement to furnish parking management services for downtown Westminster and the Westminster Station transit-oriented development areas between the City of Westminster and Laws Parking Midwest LLC in the amount of $257,924, increasing the contract amount to $506,924, and authorize a contingency in the amount of $30,000 for a total authorized expenditure not to exceed $536,924 in 2020, with an option for a one-year renewal in 2021 and 2022 in the total amount of $536,924 each year, subject to annual appropriations and contractor performance.
Mr. Voles.
Counselor Scully, could you read that again, please? Just joking.
Really?
Yeah, right. I know, right? I second the motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second for item 10J. Are there comments or questions from council? Seeing none, Ms. Parker, if you would, please, the roll call vote for item 10J.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Counselor Bowles.
Yes.
Bowles votes yes. Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Atchison votes yes. Counselor DeMott.
Yes.
DeMott votes yes. Mayor Pro Tem Sights.
Yes.
Sights votes yes. Counselor Seymour.
Yes.
Seymour votes yes. Counselor Scully.
Yes.
Scully votes yes. And Counselor Smith.
Yes.
Smith votes yes.
Therefore, the council has voted on item 10J on a 7-0 vote. This motion is passed. The next item on the agenda is item 10K, is a discussion on the city's response to the COVID-19. We have several people who will be speaking to this. I'm going to start with Michelle Parker and Dave on the use of the technology for meetings. So Michelle, you or Mr. Frankel, whoever would like to start.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will start just for the record. This is Michelle Parker, City Clerk. Tonight, we're going to talk to you about the proposed virtual public hearing procedures. And just for some quick background, I want to remind everyone that we held our first virtual city council meeting way back on March 23rd. At that time, we had 2 public hearings, which were conducted via a virtual public hearing, and at that time consisted only of written comments being submitted prior to the meeting. Including tonight's meeting, we have now conducted 5 virtual city council meetings. And during the last few weeks, staff's been closely monitoring what other municipalities are doing to foster public participation in this new meeting environment. Working very closely with the city attorney's office and folks from our information technology department, we came up with this set of guidelines to offer members of the public ample opportunity to participate in public hearings. We believe that what you have before you tonight is robust. It offers multiple ways to participate, and those ways are designed to mirror, to the extent possible, within the city's current technology and virtual meeting environment, an in-person public hearing. Just to very quickly go over a summary of what the proposal in front of you is asking for. It is asking that you give us direction on proceeding with allowing for multiple methods of submitting comments during a public hearing and prior to the public hearing. First, I'll begin with the 2 methods for submitting comments in advance. We propose that we continue accepting email testimony, which we would then compile, submit to the City Council, add to the agenda packet online, and of course keep as part of the official record of the public hearing for those who wish to submit written comments regarding any specific public hearing item. The second one that is new would also be for submitting your comments in advance. And this would entail that we set up a special voicemail box in which members of the public could call a phone number, which we would publicize and push out that information. And then the voicemail that they leave would be played back during the public hearing. Finally, we are going to ask that we be allowed to set up a virtual sign-up sheet, if you will, for those who wish to give testimony during the live meeting. And members of the public would contact the city clerk's office. We would compile a list of those who wish to speak and submit those to the chair, to the mayor, to call on in order. We would send those people on the list an email link so that they could join the live virtual meeting. And also as part of that email, we would include instructions for leaving a backup phone message in the event that we encounter or they encounter technical and equipment difficulties when they're attempting to give that testimony during the public hearing. And provided that the speaker calls in as soon as possible after having technical difficulties, the backup phone message would be played before the conclusion of the public hearing. So these 3 ways, again, just to kind of reiterate, are proposed as a way to, as closely as possible, mirror the participation that we would expect during a regular public hearing on any item before the council. And if you have any questions about the specifics of what we're proposing, we'd be happy to answer those questions. As I mentioned earlier, we worked very closely together with the city attorney's office and members from our IT department who are also here and can answer any questions that council might have regarding this proposal.
All right, before I open it up for questions, let me turn to Mr. Frankel if you got anything you'd like to add.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Parker, for taking the lead on this. I would ask that Deputy City Attorney Kristen Decker be given an opportunity to add to her participation in the process as far as the legal constraints and concerns that we were hoping to address.
All right, Ms. Decker, if you join us, please.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. Yes, I worked with Michelle a great deal on this. And from a legal standpoint, what we want to make sure of is that the people who have a legal interest be allowed to speak. So basically, anybody who's an adjoining landowner, anybody who's entitled to notice, as long as they have an opportunity to be heard, That's what we're trying to accomplish. The other thing is creating a record. As council knows, in cases of quasi-judicial hearings, it's very important to keep a transcript because that is what's reviewed by the court if we're challenged on a decision. And we think that this process does allow for an adequate transcript. And then lastly, as Michelle explained, we're just trying to keep the hearing very similar and to mirror the type of in-person public hearing that we have on a regular basis. As far as all the details, I think she did a great job explaining it. If council has any questions, I am happy to answer them.
Well, I have a couple of people who've already jumped in. So if Ms. Parker, if you don't have anything else, I'll turn it over to questions at this point.
I don't have anything else. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, let's start with Mr. Demott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually don't have any questions. I just want to thank everybody who worked on this, from the clerk's office to the city attorney, to a rare occasion to send a shout out to those fellow IT people who worked on this. I really appreciate you guys quickly bringing something forward. I know this was very concerning as far as getting public participation, because I do believe that's really important, and in a way that they can collaborate with the process real time. So I appreciate that we found a way to accommodate multiple people. Understanding in-person meetings probably are the best solution, but in times when we can't do that, this seems like a good solution to me. So thank you for everybody's work.
Ms. Seitz.
I also have to say thank you to everyone who worked on this. I do think that this provides real, meaningful access for people in our community to have their comments heard and considered by council, and it does address the digital divide. I did have one kind of request. If the technology becomes available, I would like if in the future folks who do not have access to internet could perhaps participate in real time during our public hearings through a call-in number, but I recognize there's probably some technology constraints. So I know people can call in right now and listen, but I would like for them to be able to participate in the public hearing with that, if that ever becomes possible. Is that clear? That I guess I want to make sure I'm clear in what I'm requesting.
I understand what you said, Councilor Seitz, but I think that's being offered here now.
My understanding is you had to email in, so you'd A, need internet access for that, and B, it would be kind of it like we are right now digitally on the GoToMeeting in order to participate in the public hearing portion of it, but I could be incorrect in my reading of that.
All right, Ms. Parker, can you respond?
I can, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the Mayor Pro Tem is correct. We are and have been looking at ways that we can accommodate that very request from Mayor Pro Tem Seitz, which is to say offering strictly a phone-in number that would queue people as they call in, that we could then somehow patch into our live virtual meeting. And I apologize, I'm not an IT person. I know that at this time we have some challenges in making that happen immediately, but we absolutely hear that request from you, and we'll continue to look at ways that we can make that happen.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Michelle and your team, and to Ms. Decker. This is a really comprehensive outlook as far as public participation, so I really appreciate the work that y'all have put into this. My only concern is that I know that we're giving ample time for our residents and folks to provide feedback. However, if we do get a lot of public comment, as we have in the past, my only concern is my ability to read it in the time before the public hearing that evening, as I work until 4 or 5. That gives me only an hour to sift through the information as far as what comes forward for public comment. So that's my only concern as a counselor, not being able to really soak in what's being said from our residents.
Okay, Mr. Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too want to thank staff for working on this and combining all different phases that our clients. Our residents can contact us. I want to reiterate what I have said in previous weeks too, and have to be monitoring this closely. The amount of comments that we're getting through email on all types of issues right now is down significantly. And I believe our residents right now are, for a lack of a better term, shell shocked and not knowing how to adjust to this. Hopefully we will see a difference come May, but I have a deep concern on some public hearings that we will not get the depth and breadth of comments that we normally do get because of the situation. So that's what I'm going to be looking at and watching for as we move along.
Okay. Ms. Scully and Mr. Voles, since I haven't heard from the two of you, I want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to comment on what's being proposed, but at the same time, remind council to make sure you've read the email that was sent by Mr. Tripp, both last Thursday and resent today, that making sure we understand what's being proposed and how this applied, including proceeding with normal public meetings and planning commission reviews. This process is trying to get us through being able to do as much business as we can, understanding we will still have some restrictions as far as in-person stuff, but as Mr. Seymour and others have indicated, we hope one day to return to normal. Mr. Voles.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also want to join my colleagues in thanking staff, the city clerk's office, city attorney's office, our IT folks, for everything they've done on this. I like that it is going to reach multiple people on multiple platforms. So there's kind of additional ways to have public comment. I also would like to echo what Councilor Seymour said earlier. If we have one of those where we have 50 people, and also Councilor Smith, if we have a case come through and it's a public hearing and we have 50-some people, that's going to make it really difficult. So I think we're going to have to be open to adjusting this at some point. If it's a case like that, I don't see how we can handle that. However, I do appreciate the hard work that's gone into this. I think we have to always err on the side of the public having access and being able to speak in these public hearings. I think this goes a long way to doing that, but I think we may need to adjust if we have a really large hearing with lots of people. That would be my only concern, but I do want to thank everyone for all their hard work, and I would support this very much. Thank you.
Ms. Scully. Ms. Scully, you may be on mute again.
Yes, I am. What I said was wonderful, but we'll try it again. I know, I'm very talented. I wanted to echo what Councilor Voles said. I really liked what he said when he said it's better to always be on the side of the residents. I totally agree with that. I want them to have as much opportunity to have public comment and to be present in person. But in light of the situation that we're currently in, we really don't know when we'll all be returning to public events again. And we certainly don't want to put the public in any kind of compromising position for their health and their safety and well-being. So I do think that this is a good solution for the situation that we're in. Personally, I look forward to the time when we're back in public meetings and we get to do things the way we typically do things. If that will ever happen again, I'm sure it will. It just seems a little bleak right now. And I do believe that the rest of the council was also echoing that same sentiment. So I'm in favor of this. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Decker, I believe we have a question from Councilor Smith for you. Go ahead, Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Decker, I think we talked about this in our meeting last week, and I think it came up from Councilor Scully. But what happens from a legal point of view if we said we're not looking at doing public hearings? Anything that needs to go through a public commission or planning commission, excuse me, we're not going to focus on for the next month and a half? Like, what would be the repercussions if we just put a pause on things just for now for the next month and a half to see where we're at, and then evaluate from there? I know things still need to keep rolling forward, but from a legal perspective, what are your thoughts on that?
Ms. Decker?
Yes, Mayor and Councilor Smith. There are jurisdictions that aren't allowing quasi-judicial hearings to go forward. We believe that we can accommodate those through the procedures that we've proposed this evening. If we don't go forward with them, I think we need a justification of some kind, but I don't think there will be, at least in the short term, any legal repercussions on that. One thing I wanted to raise as the questions came up from other counselors is that in the next couple months, we do not have any highly complex land use cases to be heard by council. And so one of the proposals in the materials that we sent to you is that the city manager, if there is an application that is clearly too complex and the scale is too big to be handled through this type of technology, then the city manager would have the authority to decline having that quasi-judicial hearing virtually. So I just wanted to add that. And one thing we could do to address the concern that there isn't enough time to review any documents submitted is that we could move up that deadline to, I think right now we proposed noon on the Monday of the hearing, but we could move up that deadline to, say, Friday at 5 p.m. or something like that. So I just wanted to throw those options out there.
Ms. Smith, does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Demott?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the discussion from my colleagues. One thing that I would ask, and it was kind of just addressed by Ms. Decker, is that, for us to be, cognizant of things that might have a lot of public input as we put stuff on the agenda, because I do think that we have some control over things on the agenda, such as we did with the water rate. Some things I think would be better to stay if possible. To Councilor Seymour's point, I think what I would want to avoid is to look like during this time of crisis that we are, I don't have a better term for it, but slipping things by the public. And so although I'm glad we've come up with the solution, because there are things that we need to get done in our business to continue the city moving forward and provide services that the city provides. So I'm glad we've come up with some accommodations to be able to have as much public input as possible. I would hope that if there are those things that we keep that in mind, as we've done with the water, as we move forward and putting things on the agenda where possible.
And let's see if I can summarize. I think right now, with what I'm hearing from the council, Ms. Parker, is that we are supportive of this process that you and the city attorney's office have proposed, keeping in mind that the city manager does have the ability to defer if there's something that is perceived by staff or through other processes that we have something that would draw a lot of controversy, where we would have a number of people that would need to be attending or want to attend. So I will ask the city manager to keep that in mind as they start to put items onto the agenda. But I also go back to Ms. Decker's point that over the next couple of months, there is nothing that staff is looking down the road at that has potential to be a large controversial item. But should that come to pass, then we will ask the city manager to use his authority to defer those before they ever get on the agendas. At this point, unless there's an objection from a majority of council, I'm going to ask staff to move forward with instituting this piece. Mr. Voles, you had a last minute comment.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was muted. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just we did have kind of a controversial or one public hearing issue come up for a project at 73rd and Lowell. And it's my understanding that that has been delayed. Is that correct?
My understanding, Mr. Tripp, that has been delayed at this time.
Yes, as the applicant of that was rather easy to do. And we just really heard you and heard the community that they're concerned about moving ahead with that at this time of, other things going on. So that's been pulled back. And I heard you
Well,
loud and
thank you
clear
to-
on the other issues too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Tripp. Thanks for that answer, and thank you to staff. Thank you. That's all I have.
All right, Ms. Sykes, you have one last comment? Ms. Sykes, you may be on mute. Ms. Parker, can you hear Ms. Sykes?
No, Mr.
Can you
Mayor, I
guys hear me
cannot.
now? I apologize. There's a button on our headphone that I must have hit. I apologize.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure I understood this clearly, and so this might be a question for Ms. Decker or for Ms. Parker. But my understanding from the memos that we received is that one of the reasons the city manager or city council could determine that we did not want to hear a public hearing was that it was too complex. Not that it was too controversial, but if it was so complex that the technology would not accommodate it. Is that correct?
This is Kristen. Yes, that is correct.
And then the other reason would be if a applicant chose to withdraw or delay their application. Is that correct?
Yes, an applicant could request not to have a virtual hearing.
Okay, so that's what I heard. I just wanted to make sure. I think that's an important clarification. I am supportive of moving forward based off of the ability to defer complex cases and with all of the different routes that we have for public input. So I'm looking forward to hear where my colleagues are.
All right. All right. I'm going to go through this last one, Ms. Smith, and then I'll come back and I'm going to poll the entire council to make sure that everybody's on board.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Decker, this kind of goes back to my original question. Is there any kind of legality as far as what we say is controversial and what is not, or what is complex and what is not? And I'm saying that in regards to other applicants, not the city as an applicant, but if we have applicants that come forward and say they want to move forward with a public hearing, is it wrong for us to say this is controversial or not? And would that put us in a legal bind if we were to get into that?
Councillor Smith, good question. Again, it wouldn't be whether or not it's controversial. It would be whether the scale of the project and the scale of the documents submitted and the complexity of the documents submitted and the testimony received is just too much for our process to handle, that we would not have an adequate public hearing based on that abundance of documents and voicemails and whatever else we might receive.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to try this to wrap this one up so we can move on to the next item. So I'm going to ask each council member to confirm that they are prepared to let staff move forward. And I'll start with Mr. DeMont.
Yes, thank you.
Ms. Sykes. Ms. Sykes,
Yes,
you're not
thank
coming.
you.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Ms.
Can you
Scully.
hear me now? Yes, thank you.
All right, Ms. Scully,
Yes, thank you.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Voles,
Yes, thank you everyone for your work on this. Yes.
Mr. Seymour,
Yes, thank you.
okay, the mayor as well. So we have a record of everyone being supportive of moving the system forward. Thank you, Mr. Frankel, your team, Ms. Decker, and thank you, Michelle, and your team for putting this all together. We appreciate all the hard work you've done on this. Let me move on to the next item. Mr. Hall, would you talk to us a little bit about housing? And then after that, Mr. Kirschbaum, would you give us an update on the EOC?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is John Hall, Economic Development Director. As you're all aware, COVID-19 crisis and the policy response to it has had a dramatic impact on business and industry in the city and in fact nationwide. At the same time, what we're seeing now and what you spent some time discussing this evening is the impacts on housing and residents of housing. And over the past couple of weeks, we've had several weeks actually, Jenny Grafton, our Housing Policy and Development Manager, has been representing us on the Adams County Housing Stability Task Force. She also serves as the Vice Chair of the Board for Maker Housing Partners, that's formerly Adams County Housing Authority. So she's been engaged in a number of conversations with our partners, and I'd like to ask her to provide information to Council this evening on our housing assistance efforts.
Thank you, John. Really wanted to update Council tonight on the activities that have been occurring over the last several weeks. This has been a very thoughtful and deliberate conversation, both internally with staff and with our partners, to think about how we utilize our resources, not only in an immediate short-term emergency situation, but also thinking about long-term sustainability and impacts on our residents, knowing that job loss now can have ripple effects for months, and we don't want to create a system that only addresses the next few weeks, but really thinking about how one program might transition into another. And so to that end, I'll go through a very quick high-level summary, and I'm happy to come back to Council with more details on specific programs as we develop them. But essentially, we're looking at three different facets to this work. So there are the federal funds that we receive from HUD. Secondarily, we may want to look at how we partner with an organization or foundation such as the Adams County Foundation to pool resources. And then the third aspect of it would be if Council would like to pursue a separate Westminster specific program, not wholly unlike what we have done for the business assistance grant, just focused on residential. I'll come back real quickly to the federal funds. We do have several different pots that we look at. One of those is our home funds, and that is something that we receive in partnership with Adams County and the city of Thornton. I have been working with staff from those offices to look at how we might repurpose those funds into something known as tenant-based rental assistance. That is essentially providing a subsidy to fill a gap in rent between household income and an established rent baseline. That is a program that we probably could not launch until May, but it does span up to 2 years in time. It really focuses on households at a slightly lower area median income, about 60%. It works very nicely as a transition piece with some other programs. We also have some what I would call leftover, uncommitted community development block grant funds from previous years where projects were completed and closed out, but there was some money still residual that we could look at repurposing. And so we will be investigating that further. Additionally, as I know the mayor has brought up last week, we have the additional CDBG funds specifically because of COVID-19 that came through the CARES Act. Those we have to go through a few processes to get them in hand, but we are working closely with our Adams County partners to look at using those for job retention for low to moderate income households. Separately, wanted to mention that Adams County and I believe Mayor Pro Tem Seitz spoke to this last week. The Adams County Foundation was stood up with $300,000 from the county. That program is being administered through Maker Housing Partners to provide rent and mortgage assistance. The parameters for that go up to about 80% of area median income, And that is very immediate and short term. They are already beginning to process applications for that. And then finally, last Friday, city manager and myself and Cody Erb spoke with Peter Lafari, who's the executive director of Maker Housing Partners, about their capacity to administer a program should the city want to establish our own fund with unique parameters. And so tonight, happy to answer any questions about that and receive direction from council.
Council, is there any information that you need on this item that's proposed by Ms. Grafton? And let me see, Ms. Seitz, I think you're up.
Ms. Grafton, I have to say thank you so much for, I am just, I guess, kind of blown away at the amount of research and the different avenues that you are currently pursuing. I would, if you're looking for direction, I would ask you to continue investigating and vetting, and I hope come to us with a recommendation as to how you think we should best proceed going forward. It sounds like there's multiple opportunities and probably some benefits and different levels of impact based off of which route we go. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you a recommendation.
Thank you.
But and to be more clear, I know I am supportive of us figuring out a way to assist our residents in this space.
Is there any other questions or comments from any of the other council members in regards to this? Ms. Grafton, I think one of the things that I'm interested in is any way that we can legally and potentially effectively use any funds that come to us from any channel of CDBG that can help the economy of and the residents of our city. I would be supportive of. Bringing in partners helps us pool more money, but also having somebody that can help administer the program. If we set up a specific program within Westminster, I think would also be warranted. Mr. Voles, you had a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Ms. Grafton, thanks for your work on this. I'm both the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, I think, kind of voiced my thoughts already, but I think this is important for us to find some way to offer assistance in this area. And I think you have a lot of angles you just touched on, and I'm impressed with how quickly you've been able to work on this. So thanks for your work on this. And I look forward to kind of some, I guess, like what Mayor Pro Tem Seitz said earlier, a recommendation, which way to go. And then the mayor mentioned partnerships, which partnerships work the best. So thank you for your work on this. I think it's a very important thing we're doing for our residents, at least investigating how we might be able to help. So thank you very much. That's all I have.
For the rest of council, if there's anyone that has any objection to the staff continue to pursue the potential use of CDBG funds or partnerships, please let us know now. Otherwise, I'm going to ask the staff to go ahead and proceed with where they're headed, trying to identify partnerships, funding opportunities, and pooling of funds wherever there's possible, especially in the use of our CDBG funds that we have available. All right, Ms. Grafton, I'm hearing no objections, so please continue.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Mr. Kirschbaum, would you please give us an update on the EOC activities?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have 2 or 3 things to update. The Emergency Operations Center, and particularly in partnership with Parks, Recs, and Library Department, continues to support the Growing Home Food Bank, primarily in transporting food from the downtown food bank of the Rockies here to Westminster to Growing Home. The second of those efforts occurred this past Friday. Secondly, the Emergency Operations Center manager, as well as numerous technical experts around our city, continue their level of coordination with partners either in the business community, in nonprofit organizations, schools, and our county counterparts probably most prominently. There are no taskings that we have received from the either Adams or Jefferson County or the public health agencies who are acting as the incident commands for this crisis at this time. The EOC continues its efforts to procure the personal protective equipment, PPE, especially for our emergency responders. At this time, we believe we're in adequate position, but as this crisis continues to develop, that could change. So it continues to be a priority focus. And lastly, the EOC continues to do planning for not only things that are going on presently, but activities and phases of this crisis as it continues to develop over time, and anticipate those and try to prepare the city staff for them. That's all I have at this time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kirschbaum. Mr. Tripp, let's talk a little bit about city finance.
Well, I'm going to put the expert on here in just a second. I just want to provide a little context. We had a request to update this subject, but also to review in a high-level way information that CFO Larry Dorr has presented previously. So that'll be the first thing he'll do, is give a very high-level assessment of the city's financial position as we know it to date. And of course, that'll change along the way as more information is available. But I think the request to do it, I appreciate, because it really is pretty good news given what the alternatives can be in this time. Secondly, he'll update that information that he provided a couple of times in the last 2 weeks, one in a council meeting, the other in a live cast. And then finally, he's going to talk very specifically about the 2021-2022 budget process. And I know you're aware of a change we've recommended there, but we want to get it out and say it publicly and have you provide the feedback you'd like to provide to this point. So Larry, Larry hasn't been here very long. He just started with us about 3 months ago or so, but he's really been helpful at this point. We have a great team that he walked into of finance people, budget people, and HR people who provided him a lot of support. But we're really happy with the work he's doing, and it's really, really important work right now. So Larry, please take it from here.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. Once again, Larry Dorr, Westminster Chief Financial Officer and Deputy City Manager. Well, as Mr. Tripp outlined, in addition to this public health crisis, we're having a financial crisis across the country and here in Westminster. And let me just start with the things that we know at the moment and some of the things that we're doing. The city has cash on hand in a couple of different reserves and cash on hand for projects that have not yet commenced in the amount of $57 million. In addition, in the city's water and wastewater utilities, we have a revenue stabilization reserve of $17 million to deal with fluctuations in our revenue. And in our operating activities, the greatest source of revenue to the city is, of course, the sales tax, which makes up sales and use tax makes up nearly 70% of the operations outside of the utilities. As Mr. Tripp mentioned, we have a team of about 10 people, all with excellent experience and education in municipal government finance. We're all working together to analyze what this impact will be. And we've focused on the sales tax, but we've also looked at other revenues as well. And our initial forecast is that the decrease in revenue could be $30 million. So in the city's non-utility funds, $57 million in cash, $30 million in revenue decline can give us some assurance and confidence going forward. Now, the revenue decline, of course, is a forecast. We'll continue to update that as we go along. And each time we have new information, I'll be sharing that with you, Mayor and Council, and the public. And to that end, we're not just forecasting looking forward, we're also looking at data that comes in and looking historically as well. And I want to announce that just late last week, we concluded our analysis on March sales tax payments. I didn't want any of us to take for granted that those would occur as usual, given that bars and restaurants closed on March 26th and other retail, may I just say, and other businesses closed, bars and restaurants on March 16th, other retail on March 26th. I didn't want to take for granted that the city's sales tax collections would continue to be as normal, but that occurred, and I'm very uplifted by that. To that end, our next milestone in understanding what's happening in this economic forecast will be in early May. That's when we'll start to analyze sales activities during the closures and what those exact impacts are, and we'll readjust our forecast. So what else are we doing? Well, first, tonight, thank you, Mayor and Council, for approving this refinancing on an emergency and saving $3.4 million in the city's utilities. Thank you for that. That will allow the city to take advantage of these interest rates, and that's just one but a list of things. Obviously, last week with the approval of Westy Rise business grants, and we're implementing that now. That's something we're actively doing that we think will assist our small business community in Westminster and ultimately bolster jobs and sales taxes and have a return on investment. In terms of costs, we're doing a few things at City Hall, not in City Hall, but virtually, of course, and that is we've instituted a travel restriction. So for any of our staff members who might be needing to travel for various business purposes going forward, we're restricting that and looking for a cost savings there and putting a number to it. We've also instituted a hiring freeze with some exceptions. We have about 40 FTEs at the moment who are vacant, and we're calculating a savings to that. We think that's about $1.2 million, and we'll continue to track that going forward. I should note that against that, each year the city forecasts and budgets an amount for attrition that's at the moment $650,000 this year. So a net savings of $550,000. And again, I'll continue to provide details and accumulate these various savings as we go along, all of which reduce from the $30 million a drop in revenue, the hit that's occurring there. Lastly, I just want to say about sort of what we're doing. It's now a time for us. We are mobilizing our innovation efforts internally at the city, and we think that this is going to lead to significant additional savings, and we're moving that to the forefront of the organization in our efforts. So with that, Mr. Tripp spoke a little bit about a recommendation that I made in your daily report this past Wednesday. As you know, the City of Westminster is on a biennial 2-year budget, and Council has the authority to do that in its amended charter. But it does not have the requirement to do that under charter. It has the requirement under state law to undertake a 1-year budget. Given that I'm reporting to you, City Council and Mayor, each week financial happenings, and we're revising our forecasts and looking to the very near future in terms of weeks and months, it would be, to my view, imprudent to attempt to make a 2022 revenue forecast and attempt to make program provisions in a 2022 budget. So it was my recommendation in your daily report last week that Mayor and Council, we prepare for you a 1-year budget, which means that you would be approving later this year a budget for 2021 only, and then next year in the September-October timeframe, in 2021, you would then approve a 2022 budget only. So we would have 2 1-year budgets in the coming 2 years, meaning this year and next. The reason for that is we'll be able to better understand the city's financial position for 2022 next year, and I think that that's the most prudent course of action. And I'm hoping that this isn't a tremendous divergence in as much as City Council has made budget amendments to its budget each year in the recent past. So I present that for your consideration. Let me just close by saying that everything we're doing, every decision that we're making is intended to position the city to emerge from this COVID-19 crisis in the best position possible to ensure Westminster's quality of life going forward. And I've said in earlier discussions that staff will bring policy to you, Mayor and Council, be it for small business assistance or emergency ordinances for refinancings, whatever is necessary to ensure that the city emerges from this crisis in the best position possible. So with that, I think I probably answered some of Council's questions via email, perhaps some in my talk here tonight, and I'd be willing to answer any questions. Thank you.
Well, but before I open it up for questions, I think one of the things that we're always going to be concerned about, Larry, is that, first of all, the state is wrestling with a major problem of how big of an impact this is to our overall state budget. And I received some word this afternoon that looks like the JBC, the Joint Budget Committee, is going to come back in probably around mid-May to start working on that so that they can have a better update on the financial picture from the two primary groups that they look at before they finalize the budget, understanding they're still looking at about a 30% shortfall on what was projected on the general fund. And I support what you're saying in the fact that we just do not know what the impact is at this time. And I don't know what we would truly base a decision on looking at something that's 2 years out when we don't know what's going to happen next month. So I understand that this is not something we typically want to do. We like the idea of having the 2-year budget, but with the situation we're in today, with the lack of knowledge of what's coming next month, or even at the end of this month for what we ended up in March, which was only about a 2-week problem with the shutdown, I don't know how we would project out when we have so many unknowns to try to do a 2-year budget, but I would be very supportive of us trying to look as much as we could with the best information we have at doing a 1 year and then next year doing a second 1 year. But I would like to get us back at the appropriate time to a 2-year budget cycle. Ms. Sykes, you had a comment? And Ms. Sykes, you're not coming through.
I apologize. Mr. Mayor, I agree with your comments. It seems Deputy Manager Doerr's proposal for a 1-year budget cycle makes sense, is the most responsible way to go forward in these really unpredictable times. I do appreciate the amount of effort and thought and modeling that has gone on to try to anticipate what may come next and figure out how do we make sure we continue to provide the highest quality of life for our residents possible. I do hope that we will continue to have frequent communication with council and with city staff in regards to our financial position, because I do think as these policy decisions continue to come before us, it'll give us more context in order to make good decisions and help us already have weighed some of the implications of inaction or, you know, the opportunity costs of action. So thank you so much, Deputy Manager Doerr, for your work on this. Only 3 months and you've already proven to be invaluable to the organization.
Mr. DeMott, you had a comment.
I actually have a question. So, and I appreciate the work on this, and it makes a lot of sense what you're saying with us being unsure of what the future is. And I know I've asked before as far as, you know, I know one of the questions, and you've kind of alluded to where we're at, and my concern was not really knowing how long this could go on. But in light of all that, the other thing that we do in a 2-year cycle is the water rate, and I know we've put a hold on that. But does staff have any idea if we're only doing a 1-year budget cycle, how do we line that up? Is that a thought, or have we even talked about that or thought about that, since we're kind of holding off on that conversation? And understanding we're holding off on that conversation, I still would like to understand if, you know, how we think that lines up.
Mr. Doerr.
Thank you for the question. Larry Doerr speaking. I'd invite Max Kirschbaum who's on the call to talk a little bit about water rate setting and the opportunity to mesh that together with a 2021 budget versus a 2-year budget. Mr. Kirschbaum?
Thank you, Larry. At this point, as you have already pointed out, we put the 21 and 22 rate setting process aside until we better understand the impacts. But at this point, we would probably recommend that we keep the water and sewer budget process in alignment with the general fund process. That is, if we're going to do a 1-year budget on the general fund side, we would probably recommend doing the same for the water utility.
Great. I appreciate that answer. And frankly, I would agree. I think that would seem like a good, consistent action since so much of that ties together in my mind. But thank you for the answer.
Other questions or comments from council? All right, seeing Mr. Dorr, any other comments from you?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We'll proceed to prepare a 1-year budget for the city moving forward. And of course, I'll be a part of all of Council's regular meetings and study sessions and providing you with updated statistics and information as things come along. Mayor, you mentioned the upcoming state meetings regarding its budget. We'll hope to learn something from their economists with their regular reports and so forth. So we will proceed and provide information either in your daily reports or in your regular meeting activities. Thank you.
And as to what Mr. Dorr talked about, we won't have the economic projections for the state budget until the end of this month, which then goes to the joint budget committee to start to scrutinize. So that's one reason they're going to take about a week and a half to 2 weeks to start to go through all of that before they start having the regular JBC meetings. So although they are meeting somewhat regularly right now, it's pretty limited with so much of the stay-at-home order. Mr. Tripp, would you like to close out anything tonight?
Well, I want to step back away from, and I want to finish with the COVID comment. I just want you to know that what's at the forefront of our mind right now is, what does reentry look like? What does reentry look like to the more normal life that we had, where people, were on the streets and went to work and were able to shop, and we had commerce moving. And we're paying attention to the national picture, the state picture, the cities around us, and we're communicating and understanding all of that. And we will be in tow with that. When we do that, we want to remember what we've just gone through, and we don't want to be so swift and unthoughtful that we do too much too quick. So I think, our recommendation to you ultimately is going to be to not turn the spigot on full blast to begin with. In other words, open everything up at the same time, but to try to ease into that. And then, we really are thinking about recovery long-term. What is this event going to do to change the way we look at our business model and the way we govern in our city? And the final thing I'd say is all of that is by partnering with you and with our community. We're not going to push things out there that we haven't all talked about and agreed to. And so these weekly meetings, we'll be spending a fair amount of time, probably an hour like we did tonight, on this subject, because it's really, really important. And I'll just close by telling you that we need everybody to continue to stay at home. We have hundreds of people who are working every day to keep us safe and protected, and they're coming to work, and we need for those folks to respect that and to allow us to get ahead of this virus. So please comply with the state's orders and take care of yourself. And Council, thank you very much for the meeting tonight. We did a lot of really good things. I appreciate it.
With that, we'll call the end of the meeting. It's approximately 9:35. At this time, we are adjourned, and I will ask council and all others if they can, make sure to stay at home, keep your families safe. To Don and the staff of the city of Westminster, thank you for all the work you're doing. With that, we are adjourned.